The afternoon sun was hitting the lake at an angle that turned the water into a sheet of hammered gold, but the warmth was a lie. As I watched from the upper balcony of our home, tracking the black SUV through binoculars, the air felt brittle. My military background taught me that silence isn't always peace. Sometimes it's just the breath before a strike. Down on the trail, my wife Juliana was a lone figure in rhythmic motion. She's a marathoner and a high-stakes litigator, a combination that makes her exceptionally difficult to rattle. She knew she was being watched. We found the GPS tracker under her wheel well 2 nights ago. We didn't remove it. In the game of suburban chess, you never let your opponent know you've seen their pieces. The SUV accelerated, kicking up gravel as it cut across the grass to intercept her at the bottleneck near the old willow grove. I didn't reach for my keys. I reached for my tablet, opening the live feed from the high-gain camera I'd hidden in the trees that morning. The ambush. The vehicle screeched to a halt, blocking the trail. 2 men stepped out. From a distance they were the image of authority, charcoal tactical vests, duty belts and badges that caught the light. But through my lens the illusion fell apart. The badges had no precinct numbers. The security patches were Velcro-backed, bought in bulk online. And the man in the lead, Colton Reid, wasn't wearing handcuffs. He had a bundle of heavy-duty zip ties looped through his belt. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to stop," Reid's voice boomed, caught by the directional mic I'd planted. It was that forced, baritone officer voice men use when they're desperate to be feared. Routine compliance check, lake usage permits. Juliana didn't stop immediately. She slowed to a walk, her posture perfect, her breathing controlled. She looked at them with the bored curiosity one might give a malfunctioning vending machine. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice a cool blade. "I've lived here 5 years. There is no such thing as a lake usage permit, and there is no such thing as HOA security services with detention authority in the state of California." Mason Drake, the heavier one, shifted his weight, moving to her flank. He was nervous. His hand kept twitching toward his hip. "New protocols, lady. Hand over your ID or we're going to have a problem." "The only problem here, Mr. Drake, I assume that's your name, though your badge is upside down, is that you are currently committing false imprisonment," Juliana replied. She didn't look at his face, she looked at his hands. Always watch the hands. The architecture of a trap. This hadn't started at the lake. It started 3 weeks ago in the Maplewood Estates clubhouse, a glass and steel monument to suburban ego. Vivian Thornfield, our HOA chairwoman, had stood at the podium like a warlord in a Chanel suit. She was 50, with steel grey hair pulled back so tight it seemed to sharpen her features. She didn't govern, she ruled. She spent 2 years turning our quiet neighborhood into her personal fiefdom, fueled by a bottomless appetite for control and a thinly veiled hatred for anyone who didn't bow. "Security is not negotiable," she had declared, her eyes locking onto Juliana. Juliana had stood up, citing California Civil Code Section 1500 and Penal Code 538D. She dismantled Vivian's enhanced patrol plan in front of 60 neighbors. She'd called it what it was, an illegal, private militia designed to harass residents into submission. Vivian hadn't screamed, she hadn't argued, she had simply smiled, a thin, predatory curve of the lips, and made a note in a leather portfolio. That was the moment I knew we weren't just dealing with a power-tripping neighbor. We were dealing with a sociopath who had finally found her targets. The harassment that followed was systematic. $1,000 fines for grass height variances, measured in millimeters, citations for unauthorized window treatments, then the footprints under our bedroom window, then the tracker. The point of no return. Back at the lake, the tension snapped. "Get out of the car now," Reid barked. He'd realized he couldn't win the legal argument, so he pivoted to raw intimidation. He stepped into Juliana's personal space, his chest puffed out. "I'm on foot, Colton," Juliana said, a hint of sarcasm finally breaking through. "Perhaps you should look down." "Don't get smart with me, you're coming with us to the clubhouse for processing. Board orders." He reached for her arm. That was the mistake. In one fluid motion, Juliana stepped back, her hand going to the small, concealed pouch at her waist. She didn't pull a weapon. She pulled a phone, already live streaming to the cloud. "Touch me," she whispered, her voice dropping an octave, "and I stop being a lawyer and start being a veteran. You have 3 seconds to decide if Vivian Thornfield is worth a felony assault charge and a broken larynx." Drake hesitated. He looked at the camera. He looked at his partner, but Reid was too far gone. He was intoxicated by the plastic badge on his chest. He lunged. I watched through the monitor as Juliana executed a perfect lateral step-off, catching Reid's wrist and using his own momentum to send him stumbling toward the lake's edge. She didn't strike him, that would be too easy. She just let him fail. Call it in, Mason, Reed yelled, scrambling to find his footing. Call the chief. The chief was Vivian. She arrived 3 minutes later in her white Lexus, emerging like a queen mother to inspect a battlefield. She looked at Juliana, then at the two disheveled men, and finally at the camera in Juliana's hand. Mrs. Cross, Vivian said, her voice dripping with artificial pity, resisting security, creating a scene. I'm afraid this is the end of your tenure in Maplewood. We've already filed the lien against your property for the unpaid fines. This little outburst just guaranteed your eviction. I decided it was time to join the party. The masterstroke. I walked down the trail, not rushing, humming a tune. I held a thick manila folder in my hand. When I reached the group, I didn't look at the guards. I didn't even look at Vivian. I looked at the SUV. Nice rig, I said, tapping the hood. Too bad about the VIN. Vivian's eyes narrowed. Stay out of this, David. Your wife is in serious legal trouble. Actually, I said, opening the folder, I think you're the one confused about who's in trouble. See, while you were busy playing general with your 2 hired goons here, I spent the last 72 hours doing some actual security work. I pulled out a series of photos. This is Colton Reid, I pointed to the first page. Real name, Kyle Vance. Dishonorable discharge from the National Guard. 3 counts of impersonating an officer in 2 different counties. And Mason Drake, he's actually just a cousin of your landscaper with a rap sheet for petty larceny. Vivian's face went the color of curdled milk. And here, I continued, sliding a second sheet out, are the bank records for the security fund you've been skimming from the HOA dues. It's amazing what a forensic accountant can find when they have a court-ordered subpoena for the HOA's digital archives, which, by the way, were served to your treasurer an hour ago. You have no authority, Vivian started, her voice cracking. I don't need authority, I interrupted, leaning in close so she could smell the confidence. I have the truth. You used HOA funds to hire unlicensed, violent felons to stalk and kidnap a resident because she pointed out you were breaking the law. That's not a bylaw violation, Vivian, that's racketeering. That's a RICO case. I pointed toward the entrance of the trail. The distant wail of real sirens, the high-pitched, unmistakable tone of the county sheriff, began to echo off the water. I called them the moment they blocked the trail, I said, checking my watch. I told them there were 2 armed men impersonating officers and attempting an abduction. I also mentioned there was a high-ranking HOA official on site directing the operation. The collapse. The transformation was cinematic. Reed and Drake, realizing the chief couldn't protect them from actual handcuffs, started arguing with each other. She told us it was legal, Drake shouted, backing away from the SUV. She said she had the papers. Shut up, Mason, Vivian hissed, but the mask had completely shattered. Her hair was coming loose, her expensive blazer was stained with sweat. She looked small. For the first time, she realized she wasn't the smartest person in the room. She wasn't even in the top 10. The sheriff's cruisers swerved onto the grass, blue and red lights reflecting off the glass of the clubhouse in the distance. Real officers, men with heavy boots and weary eyes, stepped out. They didn't look like they were playing dress-up. Drop the gear, the lead deputy ordered, his hand on his holster. Reed and Drake hit the dirt instantly. They knew the drill. Vivian stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Officer, thank God you're here, she tried, her voice trembling. These residents are being extremely disruptive. Save it, Miss Thornfield, the deputy said, walking straight past her to Juliana. Mrs. Cross, you okay? We saw the live stream. I'm fine, deputy, Juliana said, clicking her phone off. The evidence of the attempted abduction is already on your server. My husband has the background on the impersonation and the financial fraud. I handed the deputy the folder. He flipped through it, whistling low. He looked at Vivian, then at the 2 men in the dirt. You've been busy, the deputy said to me. Just doing my part for the community, I replied, giving Vivian a small, sarcastic salute. Security is not negotiable, right, Vivian? The aftermath. As they loaded Vivian into the back of a cruiser, her designer heels clicking uselessly on the pavement, the neighborhood seemed to exhale. People were stepping out onto their porches, watching the woman who had terrorized them for years being driven away in the back of a Ford Explorer. The HOA was dissolved a month later, replaced by a board that actually cared about things like fixing the pool, instead of clandestine surveillance. Juliana and I still run the trail every evening. Sometimes when we pass that Willow Grove, we stop and look at the water. It's quiet now. No black SUVs, no fake badges, Just the sound of the lake and the knowledge that in the suburbs, the loudest person in the room is usually the one with the most to hide. And the person standing quietly in the back, that's the one you should really be worried about.